This show would not be produced without InstantlyRelevant.com. My teams at InstantlyRelevant.com do an excellent job at creating the content, the social media posts, managing the whole process. The systems we've built to help grow a business without brand-wrecking spam have been critical, and they're just so integrated into what we do here at Never Been Promoted. So if you have the same needs of growing a business online, through social media, through web, through email, check out InstantlyRelevant.com and see if they can help you as well.
Welcome to the Never Been Promoted podcast with Thomas Helfrich. Get ready for a thrilling adventure as we uncover entrepreneurial journeys and life-changing business insights every week. And now your host, Thomas.
Welcome back to Never Been Promoted, the podcast that is here to help entrepreneurs unleash their entrepreneur. If this is your first time watching and listening, thank you. And I hope it's not your last. And today we're going to meet with Molly Tschang. She is an amazing human, very humble. So she's going to blush here shortly. But if this is your, if you've come back and you're listening again, thank you as well. We're going to go today through her journey and drive some new entrepreneurial lessons. But let's meet our guest. Molly, thank you for joining.
Thomas, it is a pleasure. And I do hope people will continue to tune in after today's episode.
I don't know how they can't. I mean, your story, we're going to get into that and your podcast and some other things you're doing. It's real, it's there, and it came out of nowhere. But take a few minutes, by the way, just introduce yourself and just set the stage or set the table, so to speak, for the conversation.
Well, I think the fastest way to get to know me is through my passion and purpose statement. In one word, my passion is ignite. And with heart, creativity, and compassion, I inspire myself and others to have the courage to be true to ourselves, dream big, and harness the wow power of us so that together we're a force of nature and anything is possible.
So just anybody who's a negative person, just take that in, let it hit you, and let a little bit absorb in as we go in, because there's more coming.
That's just, I'm just one of the happier souls, I feel very blessed in life. Which is not to say it's been perfect. There's struggles. We could go into a whole episode about that. But, I think a few years ago, maybe 7 or 8, I just decided, I'd fly out of bed happy. And someone said to me, which I thought was hilarious, "Oh, there's studies show that you can't decide to be happy." I'm like, oh, okay, that was a great thing to tell someone, which I was like, are you kidding me? But,
that person wasn't happy.
Yeah, I feel that this is the thing. It's a journey to get to know ourselves for who we really are. There's a new me every single day. So give yourself the opportunity to be the new me. But we all have these kind of plateaus where you have this kind of life epiphany. You're like, oh my gosh. And all the mortifying moments that we've had, as much as we wish we didn't have them, are part of us becoming who we are. And I had learned to embrace that. And I think I've helped a lot of folks feel the same about themselves, and I think at the end of the day, you want to look in the mirror and, feel good about you, feel grounded about you, because from that strong base is our best opportunity to help others to blossom and to grow. And that's a pretty great feeling, when you can do that. So that's I wish that for all my people I know, people I don't know, that you can feel grounded in yourself, feel good about yourself, and be able to be out there. And, if you can make one person's life a little bit better because of you, that is a huge win.
I think the optimism and the idea that you're like, I'm going to be happy today. I don't know whoever said that to you, but I don't know who's going to decide that for you besides yourself. So I maybe it doesn't happen overnight, but just the mind shift of I'm going to be happy, and that's what matters. It's a form of mental health. It's a form of just taking care of yourself, because it's not always a choice, but it's a choice to how to go that direction. I'd say it that way. And maybe you've seen the same setup. Say it skillfully. What are you doing with this podcast, and who are you helping? And I think we know why.
This thing came out of nowhere, and I have to do a shout out to my dearest mentor and idol and honorary father, Marshall Goldsmith, #1 executive coach in the world. And Marshall really modeled just being in service to others, and he was giving away everything he knew for free because he's in his 70s and he kind of already done it all. And so that idea of really helping people resonated. And so I saw through decades of corporate life how people at work weren't speaking up and saying what they really thought needed to be said. And I just find that like it's a work injustice, whether you went to community college or you went to Harvard or you went to Oxford, I don't think you kind of grew up to go to work and be a mute or to kind of say, well, I think I need to say what other people want to hear. And I mean, some people have really groomed themselves to a life of that. And that's just a bummer because that's not how we're going to get the best answers. It's not how we get to what I call an accurate shared reality, because that's essential to make the best decisions, to execute with speed and to get to our greatest outcomes. And we all see things differently. You say something, I have my reality, you have yours. We both think we're right? But if they're different, they can't both be right. And so often people aren't able to voice their different points of view or what I call disconnects. And so that idea of authentically saying what needs to be said, I was just like, this has to happen. And it turns out it's a little bit of a superpower of my own, which is hilarious for all those listeners, because I did not speak English until I was 5, painfully shy, like super painfully shy. So the ability to communicate positively and productively, regardless of situation, is something you can learn. Absolutely. And I think a lot of people out there actually, well, I could never tell my boss or my boss doesn't want to hear it, and I'm like, okay, let's unpack that. Right. So I would offer that there's some limiting beliefs out there. So the podcast started with people calling in, just asking Molly, how do I say this? And literally like you call your best friend. Oh my gosh, I have this tough conversation. What do I say? And then I realized, Thomas, my own growth was to be able to feel that it was important to speak up and say it. You had to be really grounded in yourself. And so many leaders, and they're great people out there. And maybe some of you are listening. You're super smart. You're very experienced. You have amazing industry background, but maybe not as grounded in our own selves as we could be. And if we're not, it's hard to really put ourselves in other people's shoes. So I think the opportunity for me was featuring folks who I thought really struggled, who were willing to share the struggles and the tough stuff, not to glamorize it, but just to make it real. To help people appreciate that even your most successful people, whether they were NBA or NFL or country singer, stars, right, legends, everybody had tough stuff. So to have the courage to go into it, to talk about it, to help people show that you could come out better on the other side became a feature of the podcast. And it really helped me grow. I started when Black Lives Matter and there was anti-Asian sentiments during COVID. I thought this is not right. And so I invited those voices to the show, because I think we could use more empathetic understanding of what it's like for each other. And so the ability to hear some of the stories and what other people go through, not to dramatize it, Thomas, not trying to have anyone feel sorry for anyone, but to be able to just say, wow, that is a very different experience than mine.
Who I feel sorry for often are those who are so negative towards things like Black Lives Matter, or it's the people who are oppressing. I feel sorry for them, because they're so myopically foolish.
Right. So here's a thing I would offer. And I think it's very easy to quote unquote blame the other. And I do it all the time. So I'm not making it bad or wrong. If in that moment we could feel like, hey, I have compassion for them, that they are so agitated inside about this that they can't give someone else the opportunity to feel like that's how they feel. And so that's where, if I would just say to folks, whether it's a boss who's like, and you're like, oh my gosh, did you just say that? Because now everyone's going to be terrified to speak up, right? But to have compassion to say, that boss didn't know any better, or that boss really had a rough day. Let's give them a hall pass. So I think that that's something that we can all do. And it's been a huge learning journey for me, Thomas. I grew up feeling very judged. We had one Chinese, one Korean, one Black family in our elementary school system. So I remember desperately wanting to fit in. Desperately wanting to fit in. So I get it, when people feel a bit marginalized.
Say it skillfully now. I can use GPT-4 to figure that out. So you're the GPT behind the GPT-4 on that one. I might be, at some point someone's going to listen to this in 5 years, and they're going to be like, that guy is so outdated because it's GPT-10 now. Anyway, I love this. So let's go back. You said getting grounded is so that's one of the first steps of being able to trust yourself, be happier. And I think one of the scenarios that I see a lot of entrepreneurs become entrepreneurs is because they absolutely cannot stand their culture of where they're working now and other places, and they've become lost. And I was in this as well, where I was working with good people. And sometimes I was like, man, I really just don't like working for these people. And I like people. So what do you do with somebody who has gotten to that point where their self-worth, their self-identity has been tied into a career they really don't identify with, which doesn't allow them to be them. And now they're like, what the hell this is a midlife crisis, like formation, right? This is like, oh, got the kindling, just threw the gasoline on. And now my boss has yelled at me when I thought I did great. Match lit. So what do you do with that?
Well, so I think this is the deal, folks. Your journey is your journey. And so I think some people, I can't believe I've been here so long. You can like berate yourself. If you want to do that for a day, great. And then I would be like, okay, what future do you want to create? And I think the idea of entrepreneurial spirit, I mean, that's just such a driver for, our economy, and the ability to have a sense of your mission and a sense of your purpose, I do think is really key. And there's nothing wrong with saying, I need to make a lot of money. That's great too, whatever it is. But I think that ability to understand how you're going to serve and why you're there is really important, because it's a ton of work, and so you have to believe. And if you don't believe, no one else is going to believe, and I'd say it skillfully, we're about empowering people to communicate skillfully and authentically so they're seen, heard, and understood on their most important and challenging topics, right? Which helps them create this accurate shared reality that we think makes work and life better. Like, it's a pretty big remit. Like, I want to change the world. So again, in my little way, that's what I'm after. And so I offer that, whether it's, a car wash or whatever people are starting, that the way that you want to help make someone have a better life really matters. And that personal why thing, I think, just fuels you. And I think it helps, entrepreneurs have to bring other people along. You're starting something new. Like, if it were so obvious, potentially zillions of other people would have done it, right? So what is it about what you're doing that you want to help people see a better way? And, so I think that's also a huge way of helping us all be better.
You mentioned something about entrepreneurs, and I personally believe, I'll be self-centered to the U.S. here specifically, just because it's where I live and a lot of what I know, not everything. We need more of it. We need more individuals coming out to the entrepreneurial world and trying. I think that's what's made this country great. I think it's what's going to make the country even better moving forward. It's not bad to work for somebody, but if you're unhappy working for others, you're unhappy and you cannot find your way out. And even if you do what you say, hey, be free, be you, that's not going to always land really well. I think of the Chappelle skit of keeping it real when it goes wrong. That's probably going to happen, especially if you've been the mute. And all of a sudden now you're like, here's the thing, and you start speaking up, you might find your way speaking, out. You might be on the way out. So I think you need entrepreneurship to expand, grow, and us to continue to innovate in the world. And I think to get grounded, you're saying, just so I have it, is get your pity party over and get moving to what's your new future, and getting comfort. Is there self-reflection? Is there like a process people go through, like a self-reflection of, here's what I like, I don't like, let's leave money off, that matter? Like, how do you do that? How do you get grounded though?
Well, I see, that's a really great point. And I think there are folks who specialize in just that component, but I would say to folks, it's not rocket science. It's just, what do you like? What do you don't like? And writing it down. So a lot of people are good at ruminating, but I was an engineer in school, right? So I write stuff down, but that scan, getting to know, like, I do an activity with folks about their life's journeys, but it's really thinking back, like, what were the high points? What were the low points? If you had to write a tombstone, like, what would you want to be known for? But just, asking yourself the questions to get to know yourself. This notion of, say, it's skillful, we have a framework, me, you, and we in conversation. And the me part is like, what's going on for me? Can I articulate what's going on for me? And that, think of like babies and children. It takes learning, it's skill to understand what's going on for us. And there are a lot of adults who we're not like, how am I feeling? Right? Oh, can you put a word to it? Because if you can't articulate what's going on for you, it's really hard for other people to guess what's going on for you, right? So it starts within. And when you have a sense of that, and maybe there is genuinely, I'm super irritated. It's legit that I'm irritated. If I show up in a conversation super irritated from the past conversation, is that going to go well? It's not going to go well. Like, am I having irritated energy? That's just not going to help things be awesome, right? Whether it's an easier conversation or a harder conversation. So if I can let that go, and I do meditate, I'm a big fan of yoga as a way to really get grounded within. I'm not saying you have to stand there with incense or a mantra, but the ability to really exhale and be in control, not let your emotions get the better of you, will help us put ourselves in other people's shoes. The you part. Put yourself in someone else's shoes. What could be going on for them? I don't know what's going on for them. Maybe something really bad happened at home, and maybe I could ask, how are you? And then at the third level, the we level, like, who are we together? We're on the same podcast, Thomas, but you and I are each having a very different experience of it. And the opportunity to be able to walk in each other's shoes, to empathetically understand what it's like for each other is fundamental to collaborating well, to powerful group identity, to sustaining success, right? So that's in a nutshell it. It's simple, maybe not so easy.
Whenever someone's in a nutshell, I think of the Mike Myers. No, this is me in a nutshell. Sorry, humor. Childhood wasted on movies that are now classics. So I didn't think I made it wrong. Tell me, maybe give me a great use case, success story that's maybe representative of that's exactly why I'm doing this. Like if you could replicate one of your use cases, which one would it have been?
I can't even replicate one. There's so many people, I mean, on LinkedIn went crazy. And one person wrote, she's right. It's not that hard. And I think the number one thing people get over is there's this thing in my head, and I get it. The fears are real. And I just want to be very explicit. If you are in a place where it's really not safe, right? People can't really express themselves, no matter how skillful you are. Bad things happen. Molly is not saying to put your head on the chopping block. I'm not. My question would be, why are you there? My question would be, why are you there? Okay. Presuming now the leaders that I know, they all want the truth, Thomas, because they can't run a thriving organization if they don't know the truth. Now, they may need your help to help them appreciate the ways in which they make it hard for people to say it like it is, right? Because they're not so self-aware. And so that, I think, is something that we all have to realize is we're all kind of part of the problem and all part of the solution when we get to really what I call fabulous communication, right? That awesome communication is when you can hear all the voices, including the tough stuff that might be hard to hear, the bad news, the tough feedback, whatever you think someone doesn't want to hear. But this is where I talked about that energy, letting go of negative energy. If you show up in a conversation and you really want to serve and you really want to help, and you're not saying my way or the highway, maybe you are wrong, but this is what you're saying. Generally, it goes well.
Let me take just a quick break to acknowledge one thing. I really want to thank my team at InstantlyRelevant.com for producing this show and all the content the guest gets and all the social media that's provided after the show as well. Without my team at InstantlyRelevant.com, this show wouldn't be where it is. It wouldn't be what it is. So I really thank them, and anybody who really needs help with social media, LinkedIn specifically, or your website and email, check out InstantlyRelevant.com and see if they can do the same for you. People remember you for what you gave, not what you have. And so the more you give, and I'm stealing that from Andy Stanley from last Sunday's sermon, just from down here at North Point, just so I can now tag him in the post. So thank you for letting me working that in. But it's true, though. It's like, yeah, it's true. People don't remember oh, that guy had so much money. They're like, oh, that's great, but he gave this and he gave that. Flip that out. Who doesn't what's the one maybe thing that inhibits people from taking a step towards the ability to be them? I guess I'd say it's and be able to speak freely and speak their mind and do it in a way. What's the one really inhibiting trait?
I think a big part of it is the fear, because I do think that, and when I say fear, not that it's not safe, because I think most places are safe. Yes, there are those that aren't, but I think most really genuinely are. But that whole psychological safety, which is absolutely essential, is overrated, because I can give that to you in 75 minutes with a total group of strangers, right? So I think the fear of looking bad, being wrong, offending someone, those are all real. But you think about looking bad. Okay, so is it about you? Right? And are you saying how do you say something that you don't want to look bad? You look stupid. No one wants to look stupid. So you say, this is a little bit out of my zone. I'm putting this out there because it might be helpful for the team XYZ. Right? As opposed to this, I think this is super right. You may not be right, but you have to find a way to onboard into a conversation with an idea without making it so black and white. And I think that in American business, in particular, there's this big macho, right, raw, and I'm like, okay, I mean, we could be that way, or we could say, hey, I see it. Let me offer a different angle. Maybe it's completely wrong, but folks, even wrong information will spur the cognitive thinking of a group, right? So that people are better for it.
People are very eager to share their opinions when they think something's wrong.
That's right. So I say, hey, I may be wrong. I'm sorry if I feel like I'm jumping in. This is driving me crazy. Be transparent about it. If we're always trying to serve the whole, as opposed to make Molly look better, well, let me jump in. So this smartest person in the room thing kills me. You're like, oh my God. When you're in those kinds of rooms, you're like, I do not have time for this. Okay. Because we really want to serve the whole, whatever the larger mission is of the group. It's not about me or you.
So you don't want false humility where you're like, I'm not the smartest guy, but like, oh God, here it is. Like, I'm not the smartest guy in the room, but let me explain my opinion. You're like, oh boy, like, okay, here we go. Everyone's kind of like, click, let me just check out that one.
Hey, one thing, I'm glad you brought this up. So when someone does that, right, then that Thomas, he's so full of himself. He thinks he's so great. Okay. So here's what I would say.
How'd you know?
Wow. So did you, I hear you. Have you talked to Thomas about this? Because obviously it's something that you don't think helps him and it doesn't help the team.
Oh, so the drifting.
No, I haven't said anything. Yeah. Right. People say I haven't said anything. So this is where I would offer. I'm not saying you have to, but I do need folks to own that if you don't say something to your colleagues who quote unquote are maybe not serving in the way they could, now you're part of the problem. Because
you are describing something that puckers me up. I don't like conflict. And I will tell you, this is a source of conversations with professional licensed people that help two people work through things, is that sometimes bringing up things that are in conflict. I don't voluntarily want to sign up for a conversation that ends with conflict. Help. I'm not therapist, Molly. Could you help me through this?
Yes.
I don't like conflict like that.
I'm so glad you brought this up, because here's that word conflict. Okay. So just think about that. So for you, what comes up about conflict? Like, what comes up for you? You hear that word, what comes up?
What comes up for conflict? What comes
to
my mind?
When that word comes up, what comes up for you?
Man, that is a loaded question. What comes to mind is I don't want to have the conversation.
And why?
It's a loaded question because there's different kinds of conflicts. One are can't solve it now, so why do we continue to talk about it? Though talking about it solves it. That's that kind. And then the other kind are I don't really care. That's a conflict. Like it doesn't sometimes some of the things that I don't like to have conflicts are discussing things that I don't think the other person should really be that upset about. It's like, get over it. And like, I want to answer that way, but be considerate of listening. So sometimes the conflicting kind of conversations that I'm being drawn into are ones I'm like, this is your problem. And they don't want to hear that. And that's the conflict that I'm about to do is what you're saying is, I think it's your problem and you just need to let things go. Or I think you should, I don't agree with. That's the conflict where I'm like, this person's coming to me to listen. I'm not about my wife either. I'm like any other people. I'm just sometimes like, I just tell them, if you considered, maybe you're a part of the problem on this. And that's the fight I just don't want to have. Because I don't think it'll change anything. That's the biggest piece. Like family or something else. If I have this conversation with them, I know it'll do zero to influence them. And so I just don't do it.
Yeah, I gotcha. And so that's awesome. And this is so picture perfect. And I'm not saying you're wrong on any of that. I can offer some different ways to go about it. But the mindset that you have is pretty much done. Like it's done. Do you know what I mean? Like it isn't going to help. And so you got to realize. It's also
me just maybe bowing out and be like, I just don't want to help either because it's your problem to solve, not mine. Right?
That's right. So here's where I give you some options. But I do want to offer this notion of conflict. If people are listening, thinking conflict, okay, do you think it's positive or negative? And I'm not making folks wrong or bad. Just think about it. Now, we all want to innovate. Innovation is a great word. We want to innovate. We only innovate when people want to do things differently. Okay. They want to do things differently. They want to do things in conflict. So my point is know when we're judging that word and rather like, okay, let's be open about that. If we're embracing difference, that's that whole diversity thing we are blabbering about, right? So we want you can't have it both ways. So that idea of thinking about my own attitude toward a word like conflict, is there a way that I can think about that's positive, that helps me open up and create space for me and me with someone else to have a more fruitful relationship, right?
And that's I took the conflict to on the personal level, which I'm less likely to have. At a business level, I'll step right in and get hit in the face. I'm fine with that because Hey, I don't know if you know this. I've never been promoted. So maybe my style wasn't, I've been asked to leave. That'll be book number 2. But I think in the work environment, I've always been fine to be a disruptor, say what I have to say, skillfully, maybe say someone else's idea. I'm probably a little too far forward with that. It's on the personal side where I'm kind of like,
So this is the growth opportunity, Thomas. We
right?
talk about being grounded. So let's just say there's a family member and they're coming to you and you're like, oh my God, here we go again. Right. And that's someone you care about. And say, Sally, you listen. Sally, here's the thing. Love you to pieces, or whatever the relationship is. It's a little frustrating for me. And I'm going to be honest. So I'm sorry if I sound frustrated. You brought this up. I want to be helpful. I have something I could say, but it may not be what you want to hear. Pause. See what she says. She doesn't say anything. Would you like me to share? And I don't need to.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And if she opens up, because that kind of a thing, right? So if I were, I could see, and I've been there myself where I've done things that maybe I'm not so aware. It's taken someone else who cared enough to say something to me. So I can share that, but only if you want to hear it.
I like that.
You're giving that person
agency. It opens up the door that you're like, I'll stop at any point.
Yeah. You're giving them agency. And by the way, you may not know something, right? So it gives the person a chance, because you have to understand you're going in with a certain idea of what you think, and you may not have a full picture either. So you're open to that. But that idea of that you want to preserve the relationship, ideally, if it's personal. So you just say, that's the most important thing for me. I care a lot. I want to be helpful. I don't want to overstep my bounds. So I don't want to offer unsolicited advice. If you want, what I'm seeing, and I'm not saying I'm seeing the whole thing, I'm happy to share, but otherwise it's okay.
When somebody goes and they say, I just want you to listen. This is where I might be like, I don't want to listen because you've already said all this shit.
So this is great. So here, I'm going to listen, but this is where you have to say, I want to listen. And what I have to say is I'm a little bit frustrated because I have heard it before. I love you to pieces, so I'll do it. But you have to be transparent, right, Thomas? Because
this. I'm going to try this. I'm going to incorporate
try it out.
this. All right. Listen, if you get anything from the show today, you got to try it out. That's the idea. Now, all right. I want you to maybe who should listen to, if you're not interested in her podcast at this point in what she does, you should hang up, click, finish your food, stop listening, unsubscribe, because you'd be crazy not to be thinking this. You may need her more than ever if you don't like this part of the podcast. Who should listen to your podcast? Who should contact you?
Well,
who should listen first, and then if you need help, how and who should they how should they do that with you?
So I think all professionals who want to be grounded in themselves and be inspired by amazing folks. And I've had literally superstars on the show. I've had a 17-year-old who's gotten through dyslexia. I had a young man who shared a story, having literally been in jail, on the run from the police. I mean, so I think it gives a chance to see a lot of different lives. So you can hopefully be better and have more empathetic understanding for folks' lives who are very different than yours, and at the same time find inspiration in people who are really willing to be real. And I really wanted to create community for people, because being real is great. We don't want you to go to work and try to be someone else.
Yeah,
being real in an authentic way, that also serves the whole. I mean, we can't just all randomly run around. We're in a society where we're interconnected. So, I say that with folks realizing that it isn't just totally wild. You can't just have it your way. But when we can, understand each other and work better together, like the upside is huge, and I think I really do envision this world where people win as one, right? We work together to make good ideas great, let go of what doesn't serve us. And, we can create extraordinary value and meaning in work and life. So it's just, I know organizations exist that are like that. And there's some folks who are listening now in their heads. There's a lot of folks thinking, well, gosh, they can't be. I'm like, yeah, it is. And everybody here matters, folks. I mean, I got to tell you something. Everyone's got a car. We have different levels. I'm not pretending that people don't have more or less influence, but I do want each listener to really feel like they matter. And if you can have the courage to be vulnerable, because vulnerability is a must for trust. We want everyone to trust us, but we have to extend trust. That's going to help, things move along. And, everyone here can be a positive force for change, for sure. And by the way, so this idea, you've never been promoted, but being able to be skillful and to be who you are authentically, that to me is a way to move through organizations, because when you can be the person who does that and you unleash other people to be free for themselves and to do their best work, those are people who get promoted.
They are, apparently I didn't do that. So that's okay. I always left to go do something else and make more money. That was really more my mantra was, why would I want this when I could go do that? This is the part of the show where you should Google Say It Skillfully and then figure out where you go. So Google.
Oh, let me offer one thing too. I had a 4-year run at Voice America, and I'm so grateful for Voice America. Yay. Cause they're a radio show. And then we had the podcast, and I wrapped up that to go on to a new, so we're kind of, going to relaunch in a few months. I'll probably do a video podcast, similar kind of format, but there are 109 episodes and they're epic. I mean, I can't, I mean, Curtis Martin's the NFL Hall of Famer, Zaza Pachulia, Marshall Goldsmith's been on, Alan Mullally.
You're my next question. Who is your number one favorite interview?
I can't pick one. I actually tried.
I was trying to pin you into that so we could be like, see, she likes this person more than others. If you could say a very memorable one.
Yeah. Okay. Let me just give a few, because after every single guest, I was a better person. So I just want folks to appreciate that when you start to have a conversation with someone, you're thinking, and then all of a sudden the person is way more than you possibly could have imagined. Dr. Jim Kim, who at one point was president of the World Bank, has saved, 10 or 20 million lives. Extraordinary. Bob Roth was just on my show, and he's the head of the David Lynch Foundation on Transcendental Meditation, and is an epic story. Dave Clark is this disabled guy, played in the minor leagues of baseball. I mean, had polio. I mean, they're extraordinary. I mean, the Graham Weaver is head of a PE firm, and Graham, I was crying laughing so hard because he listened to self-help tapes. He was just brainwashing himself. Sandy Ogg is another one. I mean, they're just epic. And then I want to do a shout out to people called into the show, which is not easy to do, folks. It's kind of scary. And they ask questions about, tough situations at work. And so I would offer that, folks, everybody needs help. It's a sign of strength to ask for what you need. And so if you need help, ask. Totally cool, right? And the notion of making mistakes, we don't want to make catastrophic career-ending kinds of mistakes, although we've made those. But you want to make mistakes because that's how we grow. And Gary Ridge, who was CEO and chairman of WD-40, coined learning moments. The entire firm operates on learning moments. Right. So you want to be able to continue to grow and learn. And for the folks out there, particularly you leaders, you can normalize that, be upfront of the stuff that you would do over again or would do differently, and help people appreciate their journeys. That's a win. Big time.
Well, how do people, where do you want to send them then? So where should people go to check you out or your
sayitskillfully.com is my website. I'm thrilled because I launched training programs. So I'm on a mission from above to help people find their voices and use them authentically. So Say It Skillfully 101 is going to be rolling out. Please, please, please go to my LinkedIn profile. I have a LinkedIn learning course that's, I think, for over 25,000 learners that came out within an hour. And it's a very simple and short entryway, I would say, to using your voice, and then complementing that with a longer skill-based program. So I'm really out there to help people on the one skill that I think matters absolutely the most in both your personal and your professional life.
Yep. And the LinkedIn learning is great. I mean, that's a great place to start. You have a great following there, and your content's amazing always. I can't get it out of my feed. And I tried. No, I didn't. I actually hit the little ring button, the bell button to get all your stuff, because I was like, oh, this is helpful. Because it's inspiring, right? And it's practical, and and when it's distilled, right? When you get it down to like post level, you're like, yeah, I should do that. And it's like almost like the atomic habits, right? Oh, if I just could do that, it's like a 1% win, 1%. And so definitely, sayitskillfully.com, go find you on on LinkedIn. We'll put some obviously in the show notes for this. I do have a question. So I have a few, we kind of short answer, just so people have some takeaways of what you like, takeaway. And one I want to start with for sure is maybe an author or two that a book that you're the the diamond in the rough, like, hey, I would read this. Here's why. Here's the author. Who do you recommend?
Well, so I have to laugh. I looked at some of your prep. And so early on, and I had the pleasure, literally a pleasure, of sitting next to Joe Torre when the Yankees won the World Series. But he had Joe Torre's Ground Rules for Winners, which is a paperback book that was the first probably businessy book that I actually picked up with. And I learned a lot. And it is around the people dimension, because he was leading a group of like superstar, potentially prima donna types.
Potentially.
And so I really learned a lot by how he managed, and obviously managing up to Mr. Steinbrenner cannot have been the easiest thing either. So that was one that came to mind. And then my dear friend, Bruce Kazanoff and Amy Blashkoff wrote something on meditating. And I can't believe I'm forgetting the name right now of this. It's a meditation book. And I
wish it wasn't a memory book, because that would have not sold that deal.
Yeah, I Am. It's called I Am. And that meditation book came out, I think, 2 or 3 years ago. And I do think that with the world the way it is, there's a lot of stress. There's stuff coming at us. Mm-hmm. And if you can give yourself even 120 seconds of time to just zen a bit and just breathe and be at one, that's a good thing. And no one,
you're not kidding. 2 minutes of just get my mind right. It does worlds for the next 30 minutes of your life.
Yeah. And so I want to offer to folks, that idea of a good selfish, because you need to do what's right for you, to be able to then serve others. And we all know that, put the oxygen mask on yourself. I do think a lot of folks still, it's a struggle for them to feel good about that. And I would offer folks, do it and feel good that you're modeling what you would want other people to do too. And I think that that's also a really spiraling up strategy.
I will tell you, and I'll give you a personal example and something I do. I leave 5 minutes off into every meeting, and I literally will envision in 20, not even maybe 60 seconds or so of what my next 30 minutes is going to look like, because then it gets the distractions out. And if you can do that before going into a hard meeting, before going into a sales call that you're sure they're going to buy something, maybe you're thinking of sharing, the conflict conversation. If you can imagine just 60 seconds, even if it doesn't go that way, your mind will be in a better spot. And it doesn't take long, but you do have to just close your eyes, literally just sit there for 60 seconds and imagine the next 30. And you might fall asleep, by the way, if you lay down. I've known people who can do that. They just lay down, they do it. Next thing you know, they miss the 30 minutes. It's okay. Your body needed it at that point. All right, maybe 2 questions. I have one. If you were a podcaster, and you are, where do you recommend people host their podcast?
So I am in the process of moving mine out. And so I don't feel good answering that because I don't have direct experience, Thomas. So I don't want to. I know what I've been recommended, but I haven't used it yet, so I wouldn't feel right sharing that for folks.
I feel like you're avoiding the question. I'm going to let you go on it because that's a real answer. That's fine. It's all right. I was just trying to tag it. I'll tell you what. We use Buzzsprout. They're getting tagged in this. Okay, so it's all fun. Final question, and this is a doozy, and this one matters a lot. We may not publish if you don't answer this right. Have you ever been promoted?
I have absolutely been promoted within companies. I think the more important thing is that I have given myself permission to promote myself to who I want to be and what I want to do and how I want to serve. And that's what I would offer for folks, is that empower yourself, have agency, and doing so not just to be about you pounding your own chest, but for you to thrive and for those all around you to thrive. And if everyone takes that attitude of helping others, we will help ourselves in spades, and really help the whole. And that's makes for a much better world, my friend. And that's that's to me the real deal.
Though you can't join the Never Been Promoted Club, it was an exclusive club. It's way better than Harvard Club even in New York, but it's nice. You did answer it correctly. So thank you, by the way. No, that's right. Promote yourself, because I know that's what I did as well. Is I gave myself the opportunity to become an entrepreneur, and I gave myself the opportunity to just stop kind of pretending at work because I just didn't enjoy it. And I hope others can find their own way. And I have long way to go, but every time you make a little improvement to yourself in the way that you're describing, you become happier, and money becomes less important. You still got to make some, but it becomes not the thing that you're judging your worth by. And so I appreciate all the advice in the time you've given today. So thank you so much for joining today, Molly.
Well, thank you, Thomas. And I want to do a shout out for you, because I feel like you're really willing to go there to figure out who you are, to be real for your listeners and your tribe, and to help serve them. And I'm really honored to have had a chance to be a part of it.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Anyone who's made it to this point in the contest, the podcast, you rock. You're awesome. You're probably my number one fan. You just don't even know it. But if you DM me, I'll tell you how much of a fan you are, because you heard me say this. Molly, thanks again for joining. SayItSkillfully.com. Find her on LinkedIn. Anyone that would like to come on the show, of course, you can always apply. There is an application process. I may say no to you, but that's okay. Thank you. Until next time, for Never Been Promoted, go unleash your entrepreneur and do it so with a really good attitude, and go be yourself. Thank you so much for listening.
Thanks for listening to Never Been Promoted with Thomas Helfrich. Make sure to check the show notes for our guest contact information and any relevant links. Connect with Thomas personally at neverbeenpromoted.com.
Thanks again to InstantlyRelevant.com for producing the show. All the social media, all the content, posts, articles, everything. Could not do it without you. InstantlyRelevant.com. Check it out. They're awesome. Once again, InstantlyRelevant.com.